I'm not
Come on,
doing
do
it.
it.
I'm not doing it. I'm not
Do
doing
it.
No, I'm not doing it.
I love that we both started knowing where we were going.
It's the thing is, we do this, baby. We do this every time that we have a British person on, and eventually someone's gonna actually listen to one of the episodes. Because I just assume when we interview someone, they don't listen to the episode, so they don't hear the mentally ill things that we say at the beginning of it.
What if that's what they like? What if they hear it and then they go, I got to be on that podcast?
Yeah, maybe. All right, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. Fuck, I can't do it. I can't. I'm having performance anxiety.
Oh
okay, I'm gonna do it. All right. I'm gonna close my eyes and think of England. I'm rooting to Sheila and the Dunny. That's Australia.
God.
I'm getting ready. That means having sex with a girl in the bathroom, by the way. That's something I learned in Australia. I did not do that, but I learned the phrase in Australia in case that ever does happen to you if you're in Warrigal. British is the inquiry. Sorry, my houseboy is here. I must go to the dunny with him. The inquiry, however, will begin at Queen o'clock. That's what I call 6, because that's when she has supper. That's my British accent.
Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Come in. Jeffrey Epstein.
I was watching James Bond the other night.
Which one?
The one with one of the ones with Daniel Craig.
Oh, new. I haven't seen any of those.
It was not very good. Are they supposed to be good? I have no idea.
I don't know, but the thing I liked about James Bond is that it's kind of goofy, and Daniel Craig is the least goofy looking guy.
Goof.
There's no. I mean, how far of a guy can you get from Sean Connery?
It's too serious. I mean,
He's
that
too
was the thing
serious.
with the Pierce Brosnan stuff. It was too much.
Yeah, Pierce Brosnan looks like David Cameron, so it's like
No,
I could never. He absolutely does. He has the angular nose. Absolutely does.
David Cameron is way puffier. He's like okay, if you took Pierce Brosnan and you squatted, you pressed him down so his face got fat and he was compressed in a compression machine, then maybe.
Yes. Okay,
but
so what
Pierce
you're saying
Brosnan
is yes?
way more handsome.
You think Pierce Brosnan is handsome? He looks like a piece of paper. There's nothing there.
Yeah. No, he's in that typical Hollywood and here's my hair kind of way.
Yeah.
Cameron doesn't have any of that.
I feel like Pierce Brosnan was just in GoldenEye and then ended his acting career. I haven't seen him in anything else.
You know what's a good movie is the one where he steals the painting.
Is that a James Bond movie?
Which one.
Thomas Crown Affair.
Yeah, the Thomas Crown Affair.
Okay, I have never seen it.
Rene
or heard
Russo.
Of it.
Now that's a name you haven't heard in a while.
Don't think I've heard that name ever in my life.
She looks great.
Does she?
Oh yeah, in the movie. You should
Rene
check her
Russo,
out.
if you are listening to this podcast, my phone number.
Great hair.
Yeah, I'm sure. Are you looking at a picture of her or something? I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
I'm looking in the picture of my mind.
Oh, yeah, I don't have those. My mind, people always talk about how they have these internal monologues or thoughts and stuff. My mind, there's just nothing in there. I just talk.
What?
Do you think?
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Liz.
Hey, Brace. Okay, don't answer. But yeah, I'm Brace. We are joined by producer Young Chomsky. And wait, okay, yeah, I'm just really confused now. But yeah, go on. What's the podcast
this is
name?
TrueAnon. Hello, welcome.
Oh, we're doing okay. Yeah, sorry, we're doing TrueAnon. Sorry, I thought I was doing the other one. Hello, we are taking. Come with us. Get on the steamship with us, my friend.
We're taking the reverse Titanic.
Well, yeah.
I say
First of all,
weird?
the Titanic. The Titanic.
Ew.
We are shorning ourselves of our clothes. We are putting on saris, and we are sitting cross-legged, and we have a tantra episode for you today.
Ew, no.
I'm really sorry. No, we don't.
That doesn't.
No, We actually have a episode that we've been sort of thinking about doing it for a while, and it's perfect timing. We are talking about a scandal that's happening. I
Across
kinda
the pond.
but I hesitate to call it a scandal. But I think maybe a multi-decade spying operation that occurred in the UK against its own citizens.
Yeah.
That is one of the most. I mean, obviously I read about a lot of this stuff. We talk about a lot of this stuff on the show. But this particular topic that we're talking about really affected me in a way because it's. I think it's just so. It's such a display of personal cruelty and
absolutely
on the part of the state that
it's real sadistic.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's sort of some of the victims have described it as rape by the state, and it's difficult to kind of come up with the words to even talk about it. But we have with us today a guest, somebody who was actually affected by the Spycops scandal, who was spied on by one of these police officers. But yeah, anyways, what we're talking about is a multi-decade long spying operation by British police and British intelligence on everything from left-wing revolutionary groups to tiny little reading circles and the undercover officers they sent to personally spy on people.
Well, let's get into it.
I'm not going to do a British accent, by the way, Liz. I know that you think I'm gonna.
Me neither, man.
Well, speaking of what, let's just get into it. We have with us today in the cyber studio, Tom Fowler well, Tom, I'll let you explain who you are because I think I'll do a poor job of it. There's a lot to get into here.
Sure, man. I'm one of the South Wales anarchists, which was a group that was infiltrated by undercover police in the 2000s. Since we found out about the infiltration of our group, I've been part of a wider network of groups and individuals, including the campaign opposing police surveillance, Police Spies Out of Lives, and the Undercover Research Group that are attempting to hold the police to account in various ways. That's involved taking civil legal action against the police successfully, and now kind of engaging with this public inquiry into undercover policing, which is currently taking place.
Amazing. So I think for our listeners, actually, when we talk about the inquiry, if I may call it that, our listeners probably don't actually know what that means. So can you give a little background of what exactly we're talking about here?
So sure, yeah. So the inquiry into undercover policing was called by Theresa May, then Prime Minister then Home Secretary, sorry, became Prime Minister later, in 2014. It was around the time she did the Daniel Morgan inquiry was called around the same time, and there was a whole she was having some sort of beef with the cops, and she got booed at the Police Federation. I don't know if people might remember that. That was quite. We
have a similar politician, the mayor of New York, who has a similar relationship with the police.
Okay,
gets booed a lot.
She was just. I don't think it was a political thing. I was just wanted to save money. She wanted to cut them. It was austerity.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to get cut, so. So she set up the inquiry. I mean, I think there was a suggestion that she was kind of moved as a woman about the experience of the women who were deceived into long-term sexual relationships by undercover police. Because it was a bit of a scandal for a little while. I mean, it's kind of moved off the front pages now. But for a short while, the fact that these undercover police officers had deceived women into long-term sexual relationships and even fathered children with them was a scandal, and people were kind of upset about it, and
rightly so, I'd say.
Right, yeah, and then it was discovered that these cops had used the identities of dead children as part of their infiltration. That became a bit of a thing as well. So
understandable.
Yeah, man, yeah, it's pretty fucking grim. So they called this inquiry. It was meant to start a long time ago. But due to the death of the original chair and basically the police dragging their heels on every tiny section of preparation for the inquiry, it didn't actually get started till November of this year. So 6 years after it was called, which is it's pretty bad going even by public inquiry standards. But yeah.
So what all is this inquiry covering? So this came out in 2014, or rather this inquiry was called in 2014. It is for, listeners who are digging into the archives in 2024. it is December 2020. It was finally just called, convened. And so what kind of like, what is the purview of this inquiry?
Okay, so the remit of the inquiry covers essentially, I mean, it's all undercover policing, political undercover policing. So it's the undercover policing of political protest groups. But specifically, it's about two units, the Special Demonstration Squad and the NPORU, the National Public Order Intelligence Unit. Special Demonstration Squad started in 1968 till 2008. Special Demonstration Squad was 2003 to 2011. Possibly later. It was then merged into Counterterrorism Command. So, I mean, like, these things still happen, but the unit no longer exists.
Yeah,
so focusing on these two units. The inquiry is doing it, like, in order. So the first tranche of the inquiry we've just had, that was just focused on 1968 to 1972, though there were occasional bits from later that kind of got pulled in. But, yeah, so we're just looking at that for the start of it.
And what brought about this formation initially? You said 1968. I mean, I think people will know that that was like a pretty major year in almost every Western and non-Western country for political demonstrations. But what specific? Can you give us a little history lesson there for specifically in Britain?
Yeah, sure. So, like, like you say, man, it was kicking off everywhere, right? So, and like. In the UK, the opposition to the Vietnam War was significant, man. It was enough that Britain never sent ground troops, right? Which like, they kind of would have liked to. Yeah, you look at the politicians at the time; they'd have liked to gone like full into Vietnam. I'm sure.
Well, they did send the SAS.
Yeah, they sent like some sort of support, right? And they sent like all sorts of things, but they didn't like fully commit. Like there was no British invasion of Vietnam, and that was because of public pressure. There's no two ways about that, man. They would have loved to have done. They were offered like loads of cash by the US president at the time. I forget the details, but you know they would like to have done it.
Yeah.
So the Vietnam Solidarity Campaign was probably like the biggest sort of protest network around the time, and they had a demonstration in central London in March 1968, which. It culminated with like outside the US embassy where they were going to deliver a letter, but like the plan was to break in and phone Hanoi and go like, we've occupied the US embassy, man. Like, solidarity from London. That probably wasn't that realistic, but when like realistically, you know, but when the day actually came, they marched on Grosvenor Square. Like, there's a lot of debate about why it went wrong, but the police completely lost control, knocked off police horses, like roughed up something proper. I mean, like violence levels, we're not talking about anything like massive, really. You know, I don't think it would really like stress people out, but there's no two ways about it. The Met Police lost control. Their public order was not up to scratch. I mean, just looking at the photos of it, man, you know, this is like British bobbies, like in the normal kind of get up.
Yeah, the big hats,
the pimple helmets and shit. Yeah, the whole
yes, exactly.
Like, not set up for a riot, and you've got all this like young radical left wing youth, the Maoists and the anarchists, and like they've linking arms the first time we've seen linking arms on a modern demonstration in London, and like they bowl the police over, and like they're at the gates of the embassy. They don't actually get in, but like it's a close run thing, right? And
for the Americans, I'm sure brought to mind the Tet Offensive and how the Viet Cong broke into the embassy in Hanoi. But also for the British, I can imagine this is in the shadow of May 1968 in Paris.
Yeah, so this is in March, so that hasn't happened quite yet. But like,
okay,
they got they're expecting something much, you know, however bad it is. They think is this just the beginning, man? Like this is about to get like way worse.
Yeah.
So there's a meeting the next day where all the top brass of the Met Police, the Home Secretary, various characters are like, right, your heads have got to roll. This was a terrible day at the office yesterday. We are not happy about this. We need new ways of dealing with this. So Conrad Dixon, a special branch chief inspector, or superintendent, I can't remember his fucking title. Anyway, Conrad Dixon says, give me £1 million a year, 10 good men and a free hand, and this will never happen again. He's given a budget directly from the Home Secretary. It's not going through the Met Police budget, so it's like he's carved himself as a little kingdom.
Hold on, Tom. What the fuck is the Met Police? That's like the museum police force?
Okay, right. So it's the Metropolitan Police, which is the London. So in the UK, we don't have a national police force. We got like 92 regional police forces. But like the Met Police, the London Metropolitan Police Service is like the single biggest one by far. It fancies itself as the national police force as well. Yeah, it's the London police, right?
So this new like directive was going straight to like the national government, is what you're saying,
right? Yeah. So I mean, and as time develops, it starts off just in London, but we don't know the detail yet. But by the 2000s, it's all over the country. And the relationship between the Met Police and regional police forces about that is still a bit opaque. But the initial unit is set up with like 10 officers. They're special branch officers. These are not like normal. These aren't like kind of the officers they've recruited. They haven't come from like. They're not the guys who are going undercover in like drug gangs or anything. These are like
that's super grass, right? I know a fucking word.
So supergrass are informers, yeah.
Oh fuck! All right, I do not know the word, but at least it's in the same general category.
Same territory, man. But yeah, so like he sets this unit up with these 10 officers, and initially it appears that like he's got like a budget until the October, which is the second national demonstration against the Vietnam War, which is set to be like 10 times bigger. There's branches of the Vietnam Solidarity Group popping up all over the country, certainly all over London. They're having conferences. They're having these giant meetings. Like Tariq Ali, who's like this Trotskyite guy.
I'm familiar.
Right. Yeah, okay. So he's like, So he's like your main face, right, at the time, with like Vanessa Redgrave, like giving a bit of star power, touring like all around the universities in the country, getting them to like book coaches for the October. That's going to be like the day of the revolution, right? He's like, and every small group in the country as well, every like the Marxist, anarchist, Maoist, all these different groups, everybody's gearing up for this demonstration. And the police are determined that this will not be a repeat of the first one. And so it turns out it's not. I mean, like arguably, because through the democratic processes, the open-ended democratic processes of the Solidarity campaign, they decided to do a show of strength in the park a long way from the...
interesting.
I mean, there are a number of votes that take place on whether they should have it ending at Grosvenor Square or ending in the park. Interestingly, 9 of the 10 undercover officers attended that meeting and voted in the vote. I mean, they won by more than 9 votes. I'm not suggesting that was the...
Right.
But, you can see...
Agents of influence, though.
Right, yeah.
So this whole campaign got off real quick then. I mean, so they were like... I mean, if you were talking from March to October, right?
Right.
Like they were... I mean, these guys, or this unit, which we should probably get into, like, exactly... or like a little more specifically like what we're talking about, because I do think like Brace and I were talking last night about this, how like in America at least, I think that so much, not at least this is my sense, a lot of popular knowledge of the cops and how all of that stuff works comes from like television show. I mean, for a reason, right? The US puts a lot of fucking money into doing all of that shit. But so when people hear like Undercover, they think like, okay, even for political agitation, they think just like a guy who like maybe he wears like a funny outfit and he shows up, he clocks in and out, 8 hours a day, but then goes home, or maybe it's like, a month where he's like infiltrating something. But like this is like a much more extensive campaign than I think anything. I mean, anything that I've heard of in the United States, although we should probably get into how this probably exists other places, maybe towards the end of the show. But yeah, so for March to October, I mean, that just strikes me as like their own kind of offensive in a way. You know what I mean? Like it was real quick. Right.
Yeah. I mean, so basically these officers they deployed, I mean, they've been working on these groups for some time, right? But from a desk, yeah? So they're they're not just going in like kind of, so let's learn what's happening. They already know the people they're looking to target. They've got an extensive understanding of these groups already before they go undercover. It was quite normal for special branch officers to turn up to all public meetings, take notes.
Yeah.
This time, they called the group were called the SDS, Special Demonstration Squad. There's a little bit of a joke with the Students for Democratic Society.
I was gonna.
Yeah, and the SDS in Germany too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because they were at the demo, the March demo. They were considered like the biggest, like oh my god.
Yeah, Rudy Dutschke, all those guys. Yeah.
They got helmets, man. Fuck.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So like, initially like these officers were like deployed just for this originally till that, then it became like a 12-month deployment they were talking about. But by the time we get to the 1980s, we're talking 5-year deployments. And like, so also initially, it's like people, they like the first officers talk about going to public meetings, and getting into going to private meetings. Within a couple of years, you've got like they're the treasurers, they're the branch secretaries, they're the right-hand man of the main target. They're getting into like sexual relationships with their main target. They're going more than just like turning up to meetings or whatever. They've got a full new persona, and they're entirely like living that, you know.
Yeah, I was reading about one of the first women officers who's joined, because originally it was all men, and then they.
So there was 2 women at the very beginning.
Okay.
But like, so in the initial days, there were. It's like the tactics that are kind of changed quite a lot. So initially, the 2 women, suppose the one's dead now, but the other one who gave evidence to the inquiry, she just talked about going to a few public meetings, the 2 of them together. As time went on, if she's to be believed, which I'm not entirely sure she is, but like, the deployment of female officers, like in more serious, came much later, in a, like more kind of the 5-year deployment kind of way.
Yeah, because the I think this is the testimony from the officer you're talking about. She said she joined a small Maoist women's group, which I cannot imagine was about to overthrow the crown in Parliament.
Right.
But something interesting she notes, and in fact I noted in the testimony, is that a lot of these people became, in fact, almost I think it's 3 or 4 of them became treasurers in organizations, and that's where on the executive committees, and she participated in the expulsion of several members of this small Maoist women's group, which, to be fair, knowing small Maoist groups, likely those expulsions would have happened sooner or later anyways.
Oh, man,
but
a weekly event and expulsion for a Maoist.
Exactly.
If you can't create a new party every couple of weeks, then you're doing it wrong.
Exactly, but she there was one quote from her that was highlighted that was, "I do not think my work really yielded any good intelligence," which obviously not sure if I believe it, but I eliminated the Women's Liberation Front from public order concerns. Which
man.
I'm not sure they maybe would have been a public order concern if this officer hadn't joined. I mean, I just I know it was a different time period.
There's a key point in the definitions here, yeah?
Yeah.
Like, so, like, you're hearing her saying public order concern, and you're thinking public order problem, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
But she just literally means public order. So, like, they're just not mobilizing. Like, they were a public order. They were out on the street holding placards, right? That's enough. They're not like, they'll become disorderly. They don't care if they're being disorderly. It's just being in the public as a group.
It's just their existence.
Yeah,
right.
Okay.
It's literally mobilizing. So it's like, they're not concerned whether like what you're doing when you're mobilizing. It's the fact you're fucking mobilizing is the problem. That's what they're looking to get rid of.
And how many different groups did they infiltrate back then? Like, what are the numbers we're talking?
Over 1,000 is what the inquiry said, right? So like,
so it's probably more than that.
Yeah, much more. And but also, I mean, you know how it works with like small like left-wing groups, right? There's so much overlap.
Yeah.
There's so many campaign groups that like it's really hard to define, what that means in terms of, its level of impact, like, because some of these groups they had loads of different names. They were front groups, especially the Maoists, man,
Yeah.
Like from a police point of view, I'm sure they see things quite differently, and they would see it in terms of like groupings and whatever, and it's probably
networks.
Networks, right? Yeah.
Because I noticed, like, I saw that they infiltrated a number of Trotskyite groups, and like just the sheer like, I mean, because I think it, looking in 2020 at like a lot of these groups, like I don't think that I would feel that the social, even if I was somebody who was dedicated to, upholding, the current UK government or system of government, I'm not sure I would be entirely concerned about like the Socialist Workers' Party, for instance, being a enemy that's really worth taking seriously, but it's notable how they do and how much. I mean, we saw the same thing in America, just how like lasered in and how knowledgeable they are about these things. I mean, I read that they had a report, by October, that demonstration we were talking about, they had basically the names and biographies and all these statistics about every main protest leader in the country.
Yeah, and also details of fairly minor people who just turned up to a couple of meetings, including detailed like descriptions of their appearance and if they were female, their body shape and stuff,
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So you mentioned, at the beginning of this that Theresa May was, perhaps, or reportedly, particularly moved by the kind of relationships that people got into, especially with the way that a lot of the female, I hate saying targets. It just sounds so fucking awful and like removed, but like that's what they were, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
But how they were kind of, I don't even know what to call it, but like in these like coerced relationships, and some of them
deceived
had children.
Yeah. It's horrific, man. It is. So like a number of the women came together when like they first started being revealed, and it started. It was very much the women who were like kind of, because. So I knew an undercover cop quite well. He was a close personal friend of mine. But when he did, he like moved to Corfu and like didn't get. I didn't like try and track him down or shit. Supposedly to Corfu, but like for a lot of people, these are the people they were like in love with, like seriously in love with, and
for
like then
years.
they disappeared. Like they had a withdrawal sort of system. That took a few months, but like it was a fairly sudden disappearance, and they tried to find them, like out of sheer, like, where's this? Because like these guys had like, because they had like a backup team, and they were like this relationship was really important to their deployment. They were like the perfect kind of boyfriends, right? Like in lots of ways, they were like designed for you,
right?
Had the same interests, the same tastes, same quirks. Like some major life events that you were like about to go through, they actually experienced that, and like, your dad's dying, man. Well, when my dad died when I was young, it affected me. Like and, all that kind of shit, right?
It's just incredibly manipulative, like in a level that, man. Like,
and like the same as well. That's one of the things about it. It's like it's the same each time. These stories are really similar to each other. You like love letters like written like 15 years apart by different people that are like the same. So when they disappeared, right, they try to find them. Yeah. So like, and it's like kind of why was it like there? What's this about? What's that about? And it's like they had suspicions for a long time, and sometimes for years. With people talking about people been looking since the early 80s, like the early 90s. With suspicions, thinking they were going mad before. Like, no, he really was an undercover cop. Oh, like there's these other people. So like a few of those women came together. A group of 8 of those women came together to form Police Spies Out of Lives. And they've done like some amazing sort of putting the story into the public consciousness. They brought a case against the police about those deployments, which they were successful in civil court with, and kind of really by sharing their own personal stories, kind of got people to understand the emotional impact that like these deployments had like caused. And I say like with children, and not just one of them, it happened a couple of times.
Yeah, that's something I found, because I listened to that podcast Bed of Lies that I can't remember who's doing. I think the Telegraph or somebody's doing.
Yeah, which is mental.
The Telegraph is doing it? Yes.
Yeah.
Weird as fuck.
They like weren't looking that day when someone produced that.
I think they were just like, it's like a new true crime thing, man. Yeah,
exactly. That's the way it's sort of sold. It's very, because you told me when you told me about it, you're like, it's not really the style of presentation I enjoy, and I was like, well, man. And I listened to it, and it's like, this is like that serial style of very big in America style of podcasting.
Big here, man. Shit.
Yeah, where it's like a little like one note piano thing, and like, but. What was this about? But the stories actually told in it were really affecting. I mean, just for our listeners to understand, it's like, you would be, some of these women were not even that involved in left-wing groups. They would go to a couple meetings, sometimes they were involved, but it's not like, we're not talking about, fucking Ho Chi Minh over here. Like these people, these are people who were like going to meetings against police brutality, but weren't exactly like, plotting, to blow up anything or anything, and so for some relatively minor groups, one of the I'll encourage people to listen to themselves, but one of the victims even says like, we weren't really doing much, and the police would send these guys, and basically every story is the same. These guys that are perfect for them, they have sort of the same personality as them, same interests as them, just like Tom described, and then they would get in relationships with them for years, you mentioned 5-year deployment. Like long-term boyfriends, and then and I found the disappearances very weird. They would all sort of disappear in these really bizarre ways. And it's like, I didn't really understand why they couldn't just be like, I don't love you anymore, goodbye, because that's like people do that normally all the time. But like, it's just incredible, and I found it incredible too that like a lot of these guys were found out basically because these women were like, what the fuck was that? And like tracked them down and figured out what was going on. I mean, that's an incredibly compelling part of the story.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, the withdrawal thing's kind of weird because it's like it's hugely traumatic. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's designed to be traumatic. Like you tell that they're trying to traumatize the people they're leaving. Yeah. Like that's part of the plan. And I mean, like, I don't know, man. Like sometimes I think there's some sort of vindictive cruelty. In the whole, because like for a long time,
sadistic. It feels sadistic.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's like, so like if you've been around like protest a long time, and like you're always dealing with the same public order teams on protests and shit, and when you're doing direct action, it's like the same kind of cops. After a while, you get a sense of like hatred, of the cops. Do you know what I mean? Like there's something about like it's like something like tribal, like you've been facing out each other for so long, like they're staring at your photos of you before they go to the demo, and there he is, that guy going up,
yeah,
and like intimidating people out of protest in various means, like it happens, like they kind of turn up at your work and all that kind of shit, so like it just feels like another way, like some senior officer being like, I'll twist the knife on that fucking before you leave, right?
Yeah.
It's like if that felt like, I mean, like I don't know, but that feels like, to me, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's so crazy. I mean, even, the way that, and we should get into like the kind of transition between the like SDS into like what it became later, because it's very weird how it just like continued, even though it's unclear if it really, I mean, we keep saying this like it needed to, even though obviously that's not the point. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think like it's really easy to get stuck in that thing about whether it needed to, because people keep thinking, but what were they looking to stop happening?
But it's just not the point, right?
It's not the point. Yeah. It's public order. Yeah. It's people out on the street with like placards. That's a problem. And as far as they're concerned, they've decided that's a problem and they're going to deal with it. And they found a way that's really effective at dealing with it. So like, why would they stop? Like when you look at like, so a lot of people kind of come, the cost, what terrible cost, as if like that, that's the main problem here, which is
as if they like, they were preventing this thing, but they were preventing this horrible thing from happening, but the human cost is, but they weren't, like you said, they're preventing people from going to picket lines.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think like, when you kind of understand like how much overt policing, right? How much they spend on overt policing and shit like that, then like the covert stuff's going to be like this, right? Because otherwise, what else are they going to do? They're spending like, man, we had like, I live in Newport in Wales, and up the road we had like the NATO summit like 6 years ago, And they spent like, it was there for 2 days, right, in the big hotel just outside town, and they spent 44 million on like public order policing for that weekend in a man, it's a really rundown post-industrial place I live, 44 million go a long way on a lot of shit, but they spent on like. They get $500,000 a year on Undercover officer, which is what they reckon they kind of cost.
Each cop?
That's fine. Yeah, fucking do 10. Like, sure, no problem.
I mean, it's just. I mean, that's the thing is the scale of it so wild, and the fact that it existed for decades too. Because you talked about we have in the '60s these Trotskyist groups, but obviously sort of the political scene changes as the '70s and then '80s progress, and then the '90s progress, and sort of things become. Well, a lot of these sort of big, sort of communist groups kind of, go by the wayside, and it's the rise of groups like environmental activists and animal rights activists, and I grew up
activists.
Like on like Crash Records and all this stuff.
Right,
when I'd see like the the ALF and all, and that wasn't really obviously a thing in my life as like a 13-year-old in the Bay Area in 2003. But I knew about it. I'm not sure that people sort of grasped. They were actually, at least back in those days, there was the environmentalism to that level was seen as this really extreme thing. When 9/11 happened in America, the number one threat that the FBI said exists in this country was the Earth Liberation Front and environmental activists.
Yeah.
And they remained the number one threat for years.
It was on the heels of the battle in Seattle here. It was all tied into the anti-globalization movement, which was what the real big thing was. It wasn't less the environmentalists, although they were ready to like bomb for trees or whatever.
So, I mean, the thing, there's no kind of, nobody's talking about bombs. But in the early 90s, the the British government had like a road building program. They had like this. They set aside this big pot of money, and they like redrew the map of Britain with like all these new motorways they were going to put in. And this was going to be a huge infrastructure project that was going to like define Major's like prime ministership. Yeah, like it that died at Newbury. The protest against Newbury bypass was eventually unsuccessful, but like 23 camps over a 7-mile period of proposed motorway, like just bankrupted the entire project. Like the financial losses that like, you know, not just the government had, but like huge numbers of like major road building contractors lost out on because a bunch of goddamn hippies had decided to live in the woods. Was like it's not small amounts of money. We're talking multi hundreds of millions, like hundreds. Of millions. So like and it didn't matter what those people were doing. I mean, like they were being completely like painfully like irritatingly pacifistic in their tactics, you know. But financially, the impact they were having was enormous. Yeah, and like same with the ELF in the US. You know what I mean? Like okay, so. Yeah, they burned a few places down, right? And there was like a few kind of high-profile things. But like even just their small-scale stuff of shutting things down has a huge economic impact. And like the pressure that comes from industry to government is like, what the fuck? We don't have to deal with it. You should be sorting this out.
Right.
Exactly.
You know?
And the ALF as well, because, you know, anti-vivisection campaigns were huge in the 1980s and 1990s.
Oh,
I mean,
God,
that was a major force.
I mean, it got to the point where like no insurance company would cover like vivisection in the UK. So the government became insurer of last resort for vivisection, which essentially meant that like the British government underwrote like so Huntington Life Sciences, the single biggest place in Europe for vivisection. It was the government had to prop it up entirely, and like because the protests against it, you know, which you know they tried every like overt form of policing to try and like break that, but it was only really with covert policing that they were able to like do that because. You know, if there's enough of you and you really want to shut a company down, you can fucking do it, man. You know what I mean? It's like totally doable. And like, I don't, you know, I'm not saying it's justified at all. I'm far from it. But like, if you really want to shut it down, how else are you going to fucking do it? You know.
Well, you mentioned that the covert policing was successful, and we haven't actually really talked about that much. Is the actual arrest that came from this? Because you know these guys would enter these women's lives or these friend group and stuff, and again, like Thomas said, we're not exactly talking about the 1910 like caricature of an anarchist with a bomb in their hand. I mean, these are like probably the same kind of people you or I know, and it's like, and so it's they enter into these groups like. What kind of people, what kind of arrests do they make? What kind of sting operations do they make? And what is the scale of this sort of thing?
Right, so yeah, like none, man. That's the thing. So like normally,
Jesus
like undercover
Christ.
cops, that's how they work. Yeah, totally. Like, just described. That's how like...
They're like, let's go buy some fentanyl, Brace. And I'm like, absolutely, let's go buy some fentanyl.
And then,
hey, I showed up at the hotel.
Dozens of cops descend on you. And,
exactly.
And that's that.
And they sentence you to becoming an undercover podcaster. That's what they do. They blackmail you.
Yeah, totally, right? So like, but then like the problem with that is then you get the day in court, right? Where the cop stands on the stand and goes, yeah, I wasn't a fucking... I wasn't one of you people at all.
Right.
I'm actually a pig. Right?
Yeah.
They didn't want that. So no information is being collected for prosecution. It's purely intelligence and disruption.
Yeah.
So like they're feeding the intelligence back and we're not entirely sure the actual detail, like the how much you can prove about the disruption because they're very, we would, but it's very clear they were. Destabilizing groups
right.
in various ways.
Can we talk about that for a little bit? Just like what the kind of different destabilizing techniques were? I mean, I know that we mentioned with the Maoist groups, the
expulsions.
But like, no one would suspect that to be like you said, no one would suspect that to be out of the ordinary. But I'm just curious, like what the kind of like when we say disruption, what they really mean.
So like, I mean, there's a few different ways of like doing the disruption. Yeah, I mean, like kind of in some ways, like the classic one's the agent provocateur thing that like kind of gets the group in deeper than it ever wanted to. So, like Carlo Negri or Carlo Sorocci, which is his actual real name, which we're not allowed to say in the inquiry, which is very.
Oh yeah, you're not. Yeah, the Italian undercover pig.
British, but Italian.
But I mean, it's
Anyway, so like he fucking he was encouraging like his local group to go and firebomb like this Italian fascist shop, which fought I can't remember the bloody name, but some Italian fascist group had like a shop in London, which was like
what did they
funds.
sell?
I don't know, man. I don't know, literature of some sort. I'm guessing like they describe
racist olive oils.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah.
Like Catholic goods.
Yeah.
Like
paintings of Mussolini.
Yeah. Right.
And Mussolini's hot daughter.
His granddaughter's Japanese pop album.
Has she done one of those?
Oh yeah, it's pretty good.
What, seriously?
Yeah, and crazy. She was, dude. No, I just actually just bought a photograph of this, but she was in a Israeli post-apocalyptic movie in the 70s where she's like a Barbarella type with like her breasts exposed, holding an Uzi. It's insane. I
guess if you're like an exploitation director in like the 70s, and
that's gotta be the white whale, right?
Hold this gun and take off your shirt.
Exactly. So they were trying to get them to firebomb.
Right, yeah. So they're trying to get them to firebomb the shop, and they were like, "Man, we're not. This is like a." Aside from everything else, like next door's got people living in it. What, like, come on.
Exactly.
No, this is not happening. So there's that kind of like, and also like the group that he was trying to get to do that, which was the away team, which was like just a bunch of stewards for left-wing events. Group. I mean, like they're more sort of your like kind of Saturday afternoon punch-up, not your firebombing places sort of lads. So like, but so getting people deeper in. So there's that kind of stuff. But then there's also just a really like low level stuff. So like my personal experience with my group was just like, man, like Marco Jacobs, who was infiltrated our group, was a massive fucking gossip, bro. I mean, like seriously, like it was just little niggles about, well, what Barton was saying and what Cesar was saying and blah, blah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, man. Like the British left is more than capable of eating itself. Like there's plenty of like bullshit, and I'm sure the American left is exactly the same. Of like kind
very
of
hungry
weirdos.
people, Americans, yeah.
Right, yeah, and like constantly kind of like falling out with each other and shit about like personal stuff, But like all the undercover cops I knew, and like that sort of era of those undercover cops, they were all like terrible gossips who were like kind of. All the stuff about personal relationships and like non-political like fallouts within groups.
Yeah.
Really into all that, really into all that, and like being disruptive on that kind of like personal level, and just exhausting people. Really, I think with like kind of internal bullshit. That's a huge part of it.
It really reminds me of A Scanner Darkly, that like Philip K. Dick book, and then later movie about this sort of undercover cop who is just basically like put into this drug house to like not really do much, but just like lay around and mess with things. And it's like that's sort of like, because again, like you mentioned, like, this is not big time stuff. These guys are not exactly infiltrating Al Qaeda. They're infiltrating these small groups, and if there's no crazy act, if they're not taking the bait on the firebomb stuff, well, then you might as well get them to basically not be able to function as a group, because that's the purpose of the police here. And that the tactic of gossiping is well, Mao would call that Mao himself would call that a type of liberalism, but it is. Yeah, like I think on your website there's like a sort of list of things that you can kind of go through if you suspect someone's a cop.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth noting too that like the undercover cops, their tactics basically are just heightened versions of like our worst qualities in political groups, and like that's like really just what they're taking. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I think it's worth for people to kind of think about that.
Well, how did, like, for instance, in your case, like, how did Marco Jacobs, just show up at us? Like, how do these guys sort of get on the scene?
So, I mean, okay, so in his case, the group I was part of were mostly based in Cardiff, capital of Wales. But Marco first appears in Brighton. He claims that he was like in Northampton. He lived in Northampton, and he went to some like national demonstrations of different things, and was interested. Recently separated from a long-term relationship, which had like ended a bit messily. Like secretly, he was knocked around by her, but shouldn't know. So don't bring that up. And he moves to Brighton because like there's an epicenter of a scene there, right? There's the I don't know if you ever came across the Free Sheet Schnews. was like
what is it?
Schnews. It was like a double-sided A4 photocopied newsletter that came out every week in the UK. Called Schnews, and it was like SCH News. News, and it was like the sort of before the internet and shit. Like that was right. So they're based in Brighton, and like he moved down to Brighton and started going to stuff, and like became drinking buddies with the guys involved with that, and then going to stuff in other parts of the country because Schnews would like be really keen to send somebody to like other demos in other parts of the country or direct action, different things.
Like get a report for the zine and stuff like that. Yeah,
right, and he drove and like would be like, oh yeah, man, let's go to like a day out to go to Harmondsworth Detention Centre and maybe a couple of pints for the lads at the end, eh? So like kind of befriended a bunch of people, but like because he was like a working class bloke. And Brighton is not like a working class bloke kind of town.
It's all mods and rockers, as far as I know. I mean, it's a battleground.
Yeah, right. And like, for like a couple of bank holidays in the 1960s. Yeah. But it's like it's a very popular kind of sort of I don't know, like kind of university dropout kind of town. Like it's the nearest beach to London. Yeah, so
I'm getting a Santa Cruz vibe from that. I think we have. I
don't know what that means, but maybe.
Probably, yeah. It's spiritually true.
Right, yeah. So like, there's the pier and there's the beach and there's in the summer you can just sleep on the beach, that kind of place.
Yeah.
So anyway, so like he's there. He's like really like kind of trying to be involved with that as a new person, which is kind of common in Brighton. But like when he goes to all these national things, he kind of like at the time South Wales anarchists were like, we were fucking renter mob, man. We were at everything. We were like we were kicking off it. If there was anything happening, we were going to kind of get somebody there. And he was our kind of person. He was a bloke, like he was a proper like working. He was a truck driver supposedly, and like somebody who maybe there wasn't that many of in the movement. Then or maybe not even now either.
I mean, I'm believe me, we're very familiar with this problem too.
Right. So like he's like, mate, he was like he befriended a few of us like separately, and we're like, oh, Marco as well. Whoa, man, that's crazy, right? So like he was like, I'm going to move to Cardiff because like with my work, I just need to be somewhere I can get onto the motorway easily enough, and it's right on the M4, no dramas. And it's so much cheaper, which it is fucking cheap, like in Wales compared to everywhere else. I'll move there. And we were like, that's awesome, bro. I was like, whoa, we're so active. People are moving to South Wales to be a part of our group.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, naive as fuck, I guess. But it kind of, it was like a year. I'd known him for like a year before he moved to Cardiff. So, like, he was just this guy I vaguely knew. I didn't, so when he moved to Cardiff, I felt like kind of obliged to be like even more matey with him.
Right. Because you're like, oh, cool, you moved here. Like, I'll fucking show you around,
Right, yeah, totally. And like a few of us were like, cool, man, yeah. Like, come, here's all the boozers you should go and drink in, and here's the people you should meet and shit.
Here's how to speak Welsh.
And no, and like so like you did all that, and like you kind of before you know it, and like he was funny as fuck, man. I gotta be fair.
Yeah.
Like he had a whole patter. I mean, maybe he was just tuned into my humor on purpose, but he was funny. So like before you know it, he's like you're spending all your like free, like when you go to the pub, you make sure you're texting him. You know what I mean? Make sure he's there, like. And he also, I mean, like he had that thing of like kind of into the we should do things about this, but like, oh bloody hell, that meeting's boring. And like you'd be in a meeting, you get a text off him in the same meeting. It was like, kill me now, like and
just I do that.
Right, yeah. It's like a totally like reasonable way to behave, but
exactly. Well, that's something I noticed in common with a lot of these cases is that the guys would not be like they would try to get people to do stuff, but a lot of times they'd be kind of like, this is, it's like this sort of Cavalier attitude. A lot of people who generally have been around these things for a while take where they're like, I know this meeting is not very important, and like you kind of screw around in it. And like, that's, I mean, which makes sense because at a certain level, these guys do, I mean, it's weird because maybe they do think it's important in a certain way, like in a public order issue, but they actually don't care about the issues that are being discussed in these meetings. Right. And so no wonder they're bored, Yeah.
I mean, like it's that thing. So like in there's an SDS tradecraft manual which got disclosed through the inquiry. I mean, like it's page after page of redaction. It's just like
yeah,
But one of the things in it is they refer to like their targets as like a lot of it as wearies, wearies as it's like hanging out with him makes me weary. Because it's like, let me tell you about the Red Strike dispute of 1974.
Yeah.
Like, and they were, you know, like, oh God, they're spending the time with the Wearies and it just being a bit of a nightmare befriending these people, which they just found that hard work and boring as
that's
fuck.
rude to hear you and your friends talked about in that way.
Yeah, man, yeah. But like, I've had my feelings hurt enough, I think.
Yeah.
So, how did it end? With
Marco? Or So, I mean, he was deployed for like, he kind of appeared around the time of the G8 in Scotland, 2005. He did that. He started sort of disappearing in the summer of 2009. It took a while to like kind of fully. Early 2009, January 2009.
Yeah, it seems like they have this weird like you're saying, like this sort of stuttered withdrawal process. Yeah,
so like he's around less and less. So he always had this background that he once worked in Corfu.
Yeah.
And he had like, when I was working in Corfu, let me tell you some stories, boys. It was that kind of so he was going back to like he'd been to Corfu for somebody's wedding, and he was like, oh, I got offered a job over there. It's like loads easier than my current job. Money's not great, but I live in Corfu, and and I was like, "Oh, we'll come visit." It's like, will you fuck? You'll never bother.
Right.
I'll be lucky.
Of course, yeah. I don't even know where Corfu. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So like, Corfu's an island in the Mediterranean. It's really nice sort of holiday sort of island. But like, so I mean, obviously, his routine with the women he was having sexual relationships with was like a lot more full on than it was with the likes of me at that point. But so he withdrew around that time. I mean, like we had gone from being incredibly active to by that point we were doing a lot of like we used to be like a real just direct action kind of group that did a newsletter, and then we became a group that did a newsletter and like did like film showings and talks and like did a book fair and like I don't know how much that was his influence that we were like less direct action focused, or it was just would have happened anyway or whatever. But he certainly we'd fallen out as well a lot. We'd kind of split into some rival camps within the group and shit. By the time we left. Though I mean, arguably, there was an officer sent undercover after him, which tended to be their technique. Somebody who could pick up the threads of the intelligence, use that to infiltrate. So it was not somebody I ever met, but somebody who appeared in Swansea not long afterwards. When like Mark was discovered, like, and all the kind of stuff really came to the fore, it appeared that like that officer was withdrawn like quickly. Like he went from like showing a great interest in a female activist in Swansea to just disappearing. So I mean, it was probable that was his replacement. Sort of like kind of came along. It'd be interesting to know who his predecessor was. I've no idea about that.
Yeah, before Marco.
Right. Because it seems like every one of them had like a. There was
right.
They were passing the baton, not like directly, but like kind of just to the side, and but like using those contact, that knowledge, to kind of further.
It must really mess. Like I don't know. I feel like I don't know. Maybe you did or you didn't. But did you go through like a period afterwards where you're sort of like, was that the reason for this? Was he like the cause of this, or was all of this going to happen without it? It must like really fuck with you to kind of like what's real, what's not. I mean, beyond the women who are in relationships, which that's like a whole nother level, but just even as you're talking about the what the changes that the groups underwent, like what would have happened if he wasn't there. It's I don't know, you kind of like end up playing these weird mind games with yourself.
I was completely paralyzed for years, to be honest. And I think like on a wider level, like that goes for society at large. Like what kind of society would Britain be without Spycops, right? I mean, like, and you can talk about it in terms of the environmental direct action movement, in terms of the ALF, in terms of Vietnam's solidarity campaign, the anti-apartheid movement. But like when you come to the miners' strike in '84 and like the assault on the British working class that happened there, and like the way in which every level of undercover policing to overt fucking soldiers in uniforms going around beating people up and shit, like. Britain was totally and utterly changed by that event. That we lost so badly then in so many fucking ways. Like we would live in a completely different country, I think, if undercover policing hadn't been so successful in stopping social movements in the way that they did.
Can we like pause there for a second and just give our listeners, if they're, I mean, I think we have like younger listeners, and particularly in America, they might not be familiar with that period in British history. And the undercover cops were like quite active in this moment. Can you maybe give us a little?
So, like, I mean, the National Union of Mine Workers was Britain's probably the most militant large industrial union. Like in '74, arguably they brought the government down. Who, you know, when Miller went to the country, who runs the country? Is the Conservative government or is it the miners? And the government comes the fucking miners, fuck off. So, like, you know, there was no love lost with that. So when Thatcher comes to power in '79, she picks a fight with the industrial unions, like, and, you know, it could have been the print workers, it could have been the transport workers, but in the end, it's the miners that she really picks the fight with, and she just decides that, like, it's not worth their social power. The economic benefits of the mining industry in the UK are not worth the social power that the National Union of Mine Workers has within British society. So we will destroy our own mining industry to destroy the National Union of Mine Workers. And I mean, like, essentially, I mean, I was like 4 years old at the time, but like, I mean, some of my most vivid early memories, like this was particularly here in South Wales. Like, you know, like it's a defining point in our history. It's the decline. I mean, there'd already been some decline, but this was really the fucking decline, because when the mines go, the steelworks aren't far after. You know what I mean? They're kind of linked. So, like,
I mean, it was like the beginning of the end for industrial England.
Right, yeah, and like, you know, and every prediction about what would happen to the communities happened. You know what I mean? They are now like heroin fucking just shitholes. I'm not similar.
We had a very similar trajectory here in America too.
Right, yeah. So, like, you know, but the defeating of the National Union of Mine Workers was no small thing, man. They had to change the law about secondary picketing. They had to do a lot of things to break them. Like, like I say, they sent in soldiers in police uniforms to break pickets, and the undercover policing was a huge part of, like, the detail of which is yet to come out. Like, we've got theories.
I wonder if it'll ever come out, because that's such a storied and, like, important part of British history that I would imagine, like, I mean, if it came out that this had, like, a major influence on all of that, I feel like it would be quite disruptive to, like, socially disruptive, politically maybe.
I mean, you kind of hope so. I mean, like,
well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's true.
But like, it's scary though. I mean, one of the things, you know, like, even though we know that these units were, like, designed to undermine democracy, like, the scandal is, you know, and I'm not, you know, that's not the word that, like, the sexual relationships, the stealing of dead children's identities, the individual, like, manipulation of people and destroying of lives, to be honest, which was a huge part of what they did, is bad enough. But, like, the undermining of democracy on this industrial scale, like, that scandal hasn't really been a scandal yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm curious about that, because it seems like, I mean, I know The Guardian has done, I mean, they've done most of the reporting on that. I mean, a lot of the reporting at least, but it hasn't really, like, caught on, it seems like. I don't know. I mean, can you give us a sense of, like, how it's been perceived over there?
So, like, I mean, in terms of the media coverage, like, you know, huge shout out to Rob Evans at The Guardian. Like, when you say The Guardian's been covering it, Rob Evans has been covering it.
Okay,
He's a salaried.
I mean, I don't like giving The Guardian any points.
Yeah, if I can just credit someone besides The Guardian, I'm all good with that.
Talk about undercover cops.
Yeah, right. So, like, I mean, like, it's one reporter. I mean, he's bylines every single article on it. Him with a guy called Paul Lewis, who he co-wrote the original book Undercover. Inside Secret Police.
That's the one you're interviewed in, right?
Yeah.
I was Googling around. I saw that.
Yeah. No, which I'd recommend. I mean, it was published in 2012, so, you know, our knowledge is changed, but, like, it's still, like, it's the best introduction in book form. To the topic. Like, he brought up Paul Lewis. Paul Lewis kind of moved on to became the US correspondent for The Guardian or something. So it's been just pretty much exclusively Rob Evans' reporting in The Guardian. For whatever reason, nobody, like the BBC and Channel 4 initially picked it up, a TV station over here. And Simon Israel, who's a very well-respected broadcast journalist, kind of been covering the story since it began, but only in, like, little snippets on Channel 4 now and again. BBC similarly have got a journalist they've got out long term. Nobody else, whether it's just through lack of funding or just lack of interest, has the kind of is willing to put the resources. Like, so the Morning Star, which is like the communist newspaper. Daily
I know a guy who works there.
Right, so like they've covered the story from the beginning, but
Sure.
they've been through about 5 different journalists in that time on the story because people don't stay there. It's not well paid, you know.
Yeah.
So if you come to the story late, it's kind of confusing. There's a lot of detail to it, so like
I mean, Jesus, like because this our podcast, just for a little reference, basically started researching the Epstein thing, and this seems like just another one of those things where there's so much to it that you could really just devote all of your energy to researching it, because I mean there is just an incredible amount of detail and different operations and all these sort of things. So yeah, you need a serious journalist.
Yeah, totally. So like, there just hasn't been the resources thrown at it, essentially.
And
I don't know how that's going to change, really.
Right.
I don't see like this thing that the Telegraph's doing, that podcast, that Bed of Lies podcast. I think it's really interesting because it's like it's breaking out of what up until now has been just within like a certain sort of.
Yeah, that's been siloed into kind of like serious-minded stuff, maybe.
Right, exactly.
Not a lot of people are paying attention to.
Exactly, yeah. So I mean, like, you know, maybe off the bat, you know, if that becomes like there's a new audience to it, maybe that'll spark off some of it. Well, we should cover this in more detail in some way. I mean, like, it was telling at the inquiry, at the hearing room where you could actually view what the undercover cops looked like. There was only one journalist there. From the Morning Star for every day of the inquiry. You know, if it wasn't for activists sort of putting stuff on Twitter, like coverage, you know, reading a lot of the news reports that did turn up, they were hugely lifted from what activists were putting out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The original journalism.
That's the thing that's like that's really frustrating about it too, because it's like this weird push-pull, because it's like you need those journalists to like continue covering it, because that's what builds the power that can then pressure the government to then reveal more, that more people can cover. But if that's not happening, if that like relationship isn't there, it feels like everything just kind of gets stagnant, and you're sort of, you know, and the government can like hide behind, you know, as many things as it wants. You know, it has plenty of tools to hide at its disposal or whatever. But so it's frustrating when that, you know, that isn't there, that kind of adversarial like push pull that you need.
Yeah, totally. It's a problem. Like I'd say the single biggest problem is lack of media coverage. Yeah, really.
Well, they're not live streaming the proceedings either, which I found insane. So they're just what they're doing. So, you know, obviously, ladies and gentlemen out there, you know that, you know, it's COVID, so they're doing all these fucking Zoom trials and inquiries and all these kind of things. And so, you know, this inquiry is you know, being done basically remotely in a lot of cases, although I think there are people actually in the building too.
So what they're doing is they've booked a room in a 4-star hotel off Oxford Street. Which
classic,
is the fastest hotel I've ever been in.
There we go.
I love it.
And where you can go, if you can register, if you're a core participant, so if you're affected by the deployment, they've given you core participant status.
And that's you, right?
I'm one of the core participants, so there's like 140, 60, so I can't remember the exact number, of non-state core participants, non-police, non-state core participants. So we get certain levels of disclosure depending on what tranche we're assigned to and shit, but we can go to the hearings. And you know, remember that like anybody could apply, but it's discretionary to the court whether they allow you to. So like journalists can go, we want to go, and it's like, well, from the Guardian, you can come in. But as it turns out, so they had room for 60 people in the viewing room. I mean, as it turned out, there was 20 people there because most days, because it's COVID. I traveled down from Wales, which we weren't even in lockdown at the time, you know, COVID was really low here at the time. I got the train down to London. I could go to the pub in Newport. Yeah, I go to London. Everything's fucking shit. You're in Oxford Street, right? Which is the most, it's the centre of shopping, and this Marble Arch. There's a fucking 20-foot tree and Santa made of fucking gold or some shit.
You're getting your suits done at Savile Row, which I know about from song lyrics. Right. You know,
so it's all done up to the 9th for Christmas, but there's no one there. It's empty because everything's shut.
Yeah.
You go to this
I've seen 28 Days Later.
It honestly looked like it, man. I'm not even because there's no shoppers there. There's no street sweepers here, so there are bits of rubbish flying around just like that.
Yeah.
So and that was the only way to see the undercover cops giving evidence, because otherwise all you got was this transcript which is like the stenographer's like transcript of what's happening, which was broadcast with a 10-minute delay on YouTube. With them just typing what's being said, which
ridiculous, yeah.
Man, like no journalist can like kind of respond to that in any sort of
I mean, you have
way.
to read just like thousands and thousands and thousands of word every day and then get it. I mean, that you know, there are people putting it together rather admirably. What's the fucking Jesus Christ? There's so many different acronyms that I can't remember. What is the website that is doing like the day by day sort of like examination of it?
The campaign opposing police surveillance.
Yes. Cops. Yeah.
Between you and me, it's a fucking terrible name, but I didn't choose it. But anyway,
yeah.
Never mind. Let's
check out our website, Cops.
Yeah.
We're not cops. We oppose the cops and the undercover cops, which we're not undercover cops.
Yeah, exactly.
But they've been doing a pretty good job of actually kind of going through it, and they have actors and actresses, I believe, acting it out on YouTube, which I thought was very.
Was another group. They organised that.
Okay.
So, but yeah, basically started off with just activists reading it out as it came through. I think it's called verbatim theatre.
Mm-hmm.
That's cute.
Yeah.
So it's a thing in itself apparently to do this kind of with transcripts. So they got like Maxine Peake, who's like a very left wing actor.
I'm sorry. Anything I just say, I'm going to be like, oh, she's from. I can't remember the fucking name. Fawlty Towers.
No.
That's just the only British TV show I know. I'm really sorry.
She was in. You had a US version of Shameless. But there was a
the drunk guy.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
so
okay.
In the British version was the sex crazed next door neighbor.
Oh.
Anyway, the first series of the British Shameless, one of the best bits of TV ever. Fucking great, man. Fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
American one was fucking terrible. But anyway, never mind. So like she's like a middling, like pop famous sort of actress. So she did it, and then like an Irish actress I'd never heard of was in Derry Girls, which is quite funny. She did a bit as well. Then we had somebody else who I'd never fucking heard of. But, we had like actors kind of voicing it, which really helped. And like got way more, like just both live on YouTube at the same time. Like the actors reading it out was getting like, a couple of thousand views, whereas the inquiry itself's getting fuck all,
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
It definitely brought it to a bigger audience than the inquiry itself was able to do.
So we got to wrap up soon. I just kind of want to get like some last thoughts on where you think the inquiry is going, because we haven't reached your time period yet, have we?
No, a long way off from it. We're not going to get to my time period till about 2023, I think.
Jesus Christ!
That's also just a very weird sentence to say.
Yeah. Also,
right,
you do sound like a bit of a time traveler.
Well, I tell you what, man. What you were saying earlier about the kind of how it affects your mind, I think that's the biggest way. Is that I feel like I'm stuck in a time loop of like 25 to 30, because that's the age I was during it. And I've overanalyzed those 5 years of my life, like in a way in which is not healthy, right? And I have no desire to fucking do, but like so many things, I know that there's this log of every fucking move I made, like during that time. Like, 50,000 fucking documents or some crazy shit just on me, where I found out through like some shows we did. And like, it's just like, I mean, a lot of that is bullshit, because you've got phones in there.
And
but
just every phone call you ever made,
right, and all this kind of shit, So it's like that during that period, and I've done a public access request of my like police national computer files, which is just basically what if you get pulled over for speeding kind of comes up when a cop looks at it, and like the detail in that is like. Shit, man. So like the stuff they won't release is, is like hugely. So you end up like this period of your life, you're just like so fucking aware of, and like 25 to 30 is not the time when you necessarily give a good account of yourself, Maybe your politics is a little bit like, it's a bit like.
We're all a mess.
Believe me, I know, Brian. It's yes, and that's what freaks me out so much about it, because if I found out that somebody I knew was an undercover cop during like a 5-year period of my life, I mean, we went over this a little bit earlier, and forgive me for asking again. It's like, were you like? I mean, did that sort of traumatize you from doing political stuff for a while? Just because I would be freaked out anybody who showed up.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Like, it was kind of weird because, like, at first I was like, I'm fucking, whoa, who do they send next, man? They send a really funny guy first to be my mate. Who's the next guy you send, right? If you piss them off to get that, what's the second fucking level, And I didn't want to find out. So I was all freaked out. And, like, for a lot of people, they've never done politics again since. Like, I think, like, for me, what kind of dragged me back in was doing this. Like, I couldn't do politics unless I was doing like fighting. Like, so at first it was like getting control of the narrative, in some way, creating a narrative. Like, I mean, I was lucky. I was only considered like a mad conspiracy theorist for a few months before it was on the front page of The Guardian. But like other people have been doing it for fucking decades, and they were, so like I was lucky about that. But then you've got to double down on that and be like, this really happened. It's been, this important person agrees that it happened. Like that, they admit it. Look, they've apologized to these people. Look, it's real. It's real. It's real. Working on that, and then like just because because of my background and where I live, things happened locally, and it's like you can't not engage with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you
of
have
course.
to kind of engage with that. Like the fucking NATO's coming opposite your nan's old house, for fuck's sake. You've got to be part of the fucking mobilization against it, otherwise you're a shithouse. And so I kind of got dragged back in, but I definitely politically very different the way I organized. I'm like, my trust issues are through the roof, man. You know what I mean?
Imagine. Just even in personal life.
Yeah, mostly personal life, man.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's so astounding to me is just like the sheer, and like I really want our listeners to sort of understand how like I encourage people to sort of do your own research and look at some of the personal stories of the people affected by this too. Especially these women. I mean, it affected everyone in different ways. I mean, it affects you differently if it's your friend versus your girlfriend versus the father of your children. Because I want to stress, some of these fucking cops fathered children with women when they had not only other families, but like they it's not like they stuck around and were like undercover cops as for like the next 40 years. It's like they knocked people up essentially knowing that they would leave them with a kid and incredibly traumatized, and for what? To prevent them from fucking saying holding up a fucking placard for veganism. And it's like it sounds funny because of course everyone knows that the American, British, whatever, and Five Eyes governments have done incredibly sadistic things all over the world. But this one is so sadistic in such a personal way, and I think in a way that people can relate to, because everybody knows like pretty duplicitous people or like people who betray them, but like a betrayal on this level, I think that's what affects me so much about the story is just like how cruel essentially this was.
You mentioned like the need to kind of get control of the narrative, or that being the first kind of like impetus of like when you coming back to like yourself, maybe even after going through something like that. And like I think that's something that actually like all victims of abuse, or however we want to like categorize this, like end up going through. And that's like a very central piece of kind of like being able to come to terms with what's happened and what's occurred, and dealing with that kind of with the traumatic break that has happened. And so I think that there's something there where that's kind of like actually like a universal where it's like being able to kind of like, yes, this happened to me, and like this is continuing to happen, and I'm a part of this. I don't know. I mean, listening to that podcast with, a lot of the women talking, that's been very central to them having like coming to terms with what they went through in, like we said, more intimate and, more intimate settings. I don't know. I can't fucking imagine that level. Like, we are not meant to be surveilled in that way. Like, that is just, it's shocking to me. I can't imagine. I can't imagine what you've been through.
I mean, I think it's like it's important for people to understand that like these are undercover political police, but they're not doing political infiltration. They're doing personal infiltration.
Yeah.
They infiltrate people's personal lives, and by the means of being inside personal lives, they spy on political movements. But the way that they got their it's not just that like whilst they were undercover, they ended up meeting somebody and having a relationship with them.
Yeah.
The deployment is based on the legend of being Alison's boyfriend, about being, like somebody, Donna's boyfriend, like you're trusted within the group because like you're that person's partner, and everybody has known them for years and trusts them. And you're part of their lives in like a really deep, meaningful way. You talk about marriage, shit, she's pregnant, like all this kind of shit. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's the effectiveness of the deployment is entirely based on the way in which they mess with people's personal lives. Yeah, and it does like the psychological effects. It's been incredibly knowing so many of the women who've been affected and like having those as like my close friends and comrades through this process has been incredibly inspiring.
I can imagine. Yeah.
They're like, particularly a small number of them have got the fucking bit in their teeth. And like, this is to find their lives in a way in which they are not willing to let slip. They're not willing to let it go at all. And like, I think it's something we've all kind of got in common when we're dealing with this is like, we know we've got to keep turning up. So we have no faith in the inquiry. We don't think the inquiry is going to get to anything. It's a fucking farce, right? It's a fucking farce, and it will fail by its own measure. When its own measure is shit in the first place. But at the moment, that's the way in which you get the story out, and you learn new bits and pieces. So we're going to engage with it. Call them a bunch of bastards as we engage with it, and like when it ends, there's going to be another thing we're going to have to do to keep banging that drum, because otherwise it's just going to slip away. What
do you like just on a personal level want from this?
What do I want?
Yeah. I don't know if that's a weird question.
Man? What do you got? What are you selling?
No, but because I mean, I've sort of been trying to put myself in anyone's shoes from this, and because I am somebody who when I'm wronged in a certain way, I get like I have like a very I'm a big on revenge. I guess.
Want them dead. I want their families dead. I want their houses burned to the ground. Huh?
Exactly. But what would I mean? Obviously, there's no like fixed. They can't give you some like medal for surviving. That would make it better. But what do you want?
I want blood on the floor, man. I've given up on any like. There's no like. They can't make it better, can they? Right?
Yeah.
Of course not. Yeah.
What do I want? I want the Queen's head on a fucking spike. I want the House of Parliament on fire. I want a totally different society. Yeah.
I'm with you.
I want to get rid of capitalism and the state and like all the bad shit. Yeah. I want like a totally different fucking world. But like in terms of like the aims of like campaigning against it, I'll take as much as I can get my hands on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like keep shooting till you run out of bullets and then grab rocks. I mean, like what can you do, man? Like whatever you can do, keep swinging. Like I want to get as much out of it as I can possibly get out of them. Whatever you can do, you kind of take the opportunity to do, and know that in the end I will fail. That this entire process will fail. Of course, it fucking will. What we're up against is like funded to a level which we will never be able to fucking match. They have got the resources and the infrastructure to fucking tie us up in knots forever. But like, if you don't do this, then what do? You find yourself thinking about it too often and having like, oh, should have done something about it. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, I've got no like, I can't give you anything like kind of, well, if they were to put, this, if they arrest this person and reform this and get rid of that unit and like I mean, like at the moment, there's the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Bill going through Parliament, which would essentially legalise all this behaviour, and so it's completely fine anyway. Mm-hmm. And not just on national security grounds, is what they normally try and pass this stuff off. But this legislation would be like Britain's economic interests.
Yeah,
really?
Short-term policing goals. Right?
We didn't even really get fully into. But by the way, these cops also supplied information on and blacklisted, for instance, like construction workers who were militant. Yeah, but that's like a whole other can of worms.
People who were doing health and safety safety reps were getting put on lists, spied on by undercover police to take them out of the industry, basically, so that they could, I mean, it comes down to that kind of that large companies and budgets and like wanting to. Don't want the bottom line harmed by uppity, human beings who like kind of all bothered about like health and safety and shit.
Yeah, wanted to wear a helmet. Yeah,
shit like that.
But you got the CHIS bill, and I saw that Keir Starmer basically was like, we're against this bill. We got to add some amendments and then we'll vote for it. Of course, their amendments all failed, and then he told everyone to abstain from voting on it, which is, as far as I can understand, allowing it to pass.
Well, that's what his role is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he's there to do.
I mean, it fits with his track record as Director of Public Prosecutions. A role
exactly.
he was in.
Right.
When he's
your Kamala Harris. He's a cop.
Right, yeah. So I mean, when the Spycops thing broke in the first place, he was a director of public prosecutions. He decided not to allow cases to be brought against individual officers. I mean, he was also director of public prosecutions in the aftermath of the 2011 riots, and he decided it was worthwhile to prosecute people for stealing a bottle of water and sending a young mother to prison for years for that. I mean, like, the guy's got a track record. When people tell you who they are, you should believe them immediately.
That's how he made his name.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, actually, he made his name as a human rights lawyer, fucking doing pro bono work for the McLeod campaign, which is like, but there we go. I mean, like, he was probably spied on during that period. But, I mean, like, there's nobody as supportive of the state as those who are wronged by it, but then employed by it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think only like a certain amount. I saw that like a few like sort of more of the left wing members of the Labour Party actually did vote against it, and then they were sort of taken off the front bench.
Yeah, 34 of them, including like a couple of people who like had quite promising careers within the shadow cabinet. So like, fair play to them for resigning from the shadow cabinet to do that. I mean, appalling they had to. But I mean, it was the usual suspects. It was the Socialist Campaign group. So it's Corbyn's mob, if you like. People in the they're not, but
Well, buried even further now.
Yeah, I mean, like because Starmer said he was going to abstain, not all the Conservative Party voted for it. They didn't have to turn up. They knew they would win. So if he had said that they were going to vote against it, then Boris would have got a 3-line whip. But as it stood, the amount of people voted for it, like if at the last minute they changed their minds, they could have beaten the bill. I mean, it's not law yet. It's in the House of Lords at the moment. Due to the archaic, like, British
I know. I love it. It's just so they're the unelected, like technically, incredible.
I mean, like, their opposition's been much more. I mean, some of them are like really angry about it because chiz is an assault on the English language. What does this even mean? I don't understand.
Hey, take it however we can get it, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, but it's it's a thin line of fucking defense there. But it probably will become law, and then like all this stuff. I mean, like, it's not retrospective, theoretically, but you know what it's like, man, in court, like a public inquiry, the judges will say, well, even though this legislation is not retrospective, it certainly shows the will of Parliament on these issues, So that'll probably go badly overall, I would imagine.
Right.
Well, what doesn't? Well, Tom, this interview has been, despite the subject matter, a joy to conduct. And I just wanted to ask, what resources would you sort of steer people to? What can people do? Give me the spiel.
So, I mean, like, I run a very poorly looking website, spycops.info.
I don't think it's that bad. You said that in email. It's fine website.
Yeah, what are you talking about? It's fine.
It's a very DIY bit. I mean, it's got a bit better recently. I spent like a weekend like trying to make it look a bit prettier the other day, so it looks slightly better. Yeah. Essentially, I mean, I purely did it because when this all started, I'm a printer by trade, and I was like, I'll run off some stickers, and I didn't have a website to put on there because it was new, so I just registered one and put it on the stickers. And I printed like 20,000 of these stickers, and I haven't actually put them all up yet. But so I was like, I better keep a website going. But that's got links to everything, all the various different groups. Like, follow me on Twitter, man, Tom B. Fowler. I kind of keep up to date with like everything that comes out, and when there's a sitting of the inquiry or any court case related to it or a debate in Parliament, I try and live tweet it with jokes and asides, and I'm not I'm very partisan. Do you know what I mean? So perfect. I mean, like, there's loads of other things, but you can find links to everything on spycops.info.
Perfect.
Awesome. We gotta have you back on for some other reason. This was such a fun conversation.
This has been great. Let me know anything else you know a bunch about, because this has been.
I can bore you with Welsh fucking political life if you like. Fucking hell. But
Well, I was actually sent by the CIA to infiltrate Plaid Cymru.
Oh my God, man! That is the best pronunciation I've ever heard in my life of that fucking Plaid Cymru. Wow, man! Plaid Cymru, right? Plaid Cymru.
Yeah. That's what I said. I said I have it's a California accent. I say the same thing, but it comes out to me. I actually have a book on like. It's called like fringe political groups in Britain or something like that.
Right, yeah.
And there's a whole section on like Welsh language groups. I wanted to mention, I cannot finish this without mentioning that, check this perverted shit out. When the SDS was sort of conducting this like wide ranging sort of sweep of groups in the 60s, one of the groups they infiltrated was a children's group by children to stop caning at British schools. Caning is a practice where you are beaten with a cane. And the SDS infiltrated this group. So the school strikes of 1974 are like really inspiring. And if you look at what's really interesting is you look at all these early SDS reports, these meetings they were at, and they're like, we're a meeting of there was a large meeting, there was 100 people there. But the school strikes, it's like, there's 3,000 school kids screaming for murder, stealing policemen's helmets, and that's real. They were the most exciting group that were being infiltrated, I think, And totally targeting children for that. I mean, the women's liberation groups, they were fighting against fucking discrimination at work and stuff, whilst that woman cop was being paid 90% of what exactly, women, they were trying to go for equal pay, and the woman cop was being paid less than the male cops. It's like,
I know this isn't what happened, but it's funny to think of it as being infiltrated by child cops.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
In Britain they use child spies, particularly.
What?
So part of the rationale is is county lines, county lines drug rings. So the drug industry in the UK is centered around a few major cities, and historically they've had gang wars, whereas places where I live, it's kind of your local fucking head who flogs a bit of dope on the side sort of thing. So these large drug gangs spread out around the country through these county lines, where they kind of recruit very youngsters. To transport drugs, right? Because they don't get searched and blah blah blah. So it became a thing of turning those into informers. Has become quite the thing by the British police.
That makes more sense.
Yeah,
I mean, it's awful, but it's awful, I understand the workflow there. I guess.
I was thinking more along the lines of you're 15 and someone's like, brother, you need to join the force. We got to get these school kids. They keep skipping school. Listen, you got to look at the college rates of France, of Germany. We're never gonna get there. I know they don't call it college there. That's what they call high school. It's but you know what I mean. Well, we got to wrap up, Tom. This has been. Thank you so much for joining us.
No worries, man.
That's been fantastic. Cool, and we'll see you on the M4.
Yeah, cool, man. Pop in anytime, yeah.
Man, Tom said something that I've just been thinking about now that we behind the curtain, behind the veil, lift the curtain, whichever. Mm-hmm. We stopped the interview maybe 10 minutes ago, but I've been thinking about this for the past 10 minutes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But he was talking about how when Thatcher came to power and when she was going after the miners, and she said she'd rather attack their own British own interest, economic interest, that basically that what he said about the mining industry not matching the social power that the miners had, and that that kind of has that is kind of the operating principle of the Spycops operation, that no matter the little no matter how productive these political groups or these people are or aren't, even their mere existence and organization is not worth the social power it holds, which is very little. And that is, I think that gets at what about it is so insanely perverse and fucked up.
Yeah.
Because it's even their little mere existence is too much for the state to tolerate.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of the construction workers, I was reading about the blacklisted workers last night. I mean, these are guys who just it's like the guy on the work site who's we got to be safe. The company's not giving us this. We need goggles or whatever. And these people were barred from their trades essentially for the rest of their lives. Through a combination of their employers and the police. And it's the fact that I think the thing that's so crazy about it is there's no target too small for them, right? I think, for some listeners, I'm sure that you'll sort of recognize yourself in these groups that we're talking about. And it's if you think of just these activities that you do and you might not take too seriously, you might be well, I have to do it. There's nothing else to do. But, I know it's not really affecting anything. And then to have somebody still looking over your shoulder. And the thing that really gets me is the fact that like for Tom, for instance, like his every move was basically recorded for, 50,000 pages of documents. I mean, that would, if that existed for me, I think I don't know if I would be able to sleep at night. Exactly. Because it's like, it's I mean, it's just such an incredible violation, and like, Britain is very different, I think, than America in some ways. Like, for instance, it's a lot easier to get arrested for saying stuff on Facebook over there.
Right.
And like, it's just, it's a, I don't know. Europe is sort of just like the soft police state in so many places.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's I don't know. I encourage people to sort of listen to that Bed of Lies podcast to listen to sort of like the firsthand accounts of these women, because they're really affecting. And it's appalling kind of what they went through or what the state did to them.
Well, on that note, which is a bit sad, but okay. My name is Liz.
My name is Brace Belden, and so I'm just doing a little uplifting thing at the end. And here is my handler and producer, Young Chomsky. The podcast is called TrueAnon.
And
thank
we
you.
will... Oh.
I'm doing a thank you now. To thank our audience.
Oh my God. All right.
You're not going to say thank you too?
No. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I knew you were going to do that. God, that fucking setup.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
We'll see you next time.
I'm not sorry.
Bye-bye.
Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein.